A knife edge of sunlight breached the horizon, painting the Arizona sky in violent hues of crimson and gold. Rebecca Mitchell's cracked lips parted as she gasped for air, each breath shallow and painful in the merciless heat. 3 days ago, she had been part of a wagon train heading west. 3 days ago, she had companions, provisions, hope. Now, she had only the clothes on her back, a single canteen half empty, and the crushing certainty that she would die alone in this wasteland. The arrow wounds in her shoulder and leg had stopped bleeding, but fever burned through her body like wildfire. She couldn't remember how far she had crawled from the site of the ambush. The screams still echoed in her ears. Men, women, children, cut down by raiders who had appeared from nowhere and vanished just as quickly, leaving nothing but death in their wake. Not Apache, not Navajo, just men with covered faces and quick, brutal efficiency. Rebecca clutched her wedding band, twisting it around her finger as she squinted at the horizon. No sign of civilization, no trail to follow, just endless stretches of scrubland punctuated by jutting rock formations that seemed to mock her futile struggle for survival. Thomas, she whispered, the name of her dead husband catching in her throat. If he hadn't insisted they join this ill-fated expedition to Silver Creek. But regrets were luxuries she could no longer afford. Not with the sun climbing higher, promising another day of unrelenting heat. And somewhere in the distance, barely visible against the cloudless sky, a lone vulture had begun to circle. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The sun climbed mercilessly toward its zenith, a molten coin hammered into the vast anvil of sky. Rebecca's vision blurred as she forced herself onward, each step an act of desperate defiance. Her once fine calico dress hung in tatters, darkened with dust and blood. The wound in her leg burned with every movement, but to stop was to surrender. And Rebecca Mitchell had not survived 29 hard years on this earth to die face down in the Arizona dirt. She had been a schoolteacher once, in a previous life, that now seemed like a half-remembered dream. Books and letters and the careful instruction of children, all replaced by the harsh education of the frontier. Thomas had promised her a new beginning in Silver Creek, where his brother's mine was yielding silver in quantities that promised fortune. They would build a proper house, perhaps start a small school. Dreams as insubstantial as morning mist evaporated in the heat of brutal reality. A sound stopped her, a faint scuffing of footsteps on stone. Rebecca froze, her heart hammering against her ribs as she scanned her surroundings. The terrain offered little cover, just scattered sagebrush, and the occasional stunted juniper. The footsteps came again, closer now. Someone was approaching with the deliberate quiet of a predator stalking prey. Her fingers closed around a jagged rock, a pathetic weapon, but the only one available. If the raiders had returned to finish what they started, she would not make it easy for them. A shadow moved among the rocks ahead, resolving into the silhouette of a man, tall, broad-shouldered, motionless now, as he observed her from 30 paces away. Rebecca squinted against the sun, trying to make out his features. Not one of the raiders. This man carried a rifle slung across his back, wore buckskin leggings and a blue trade-cloth shirt. His long black hair was tied back with a band of red cloth. A Navajo. Rebecca's grip tightened on the rock, though she knew it was useless. She had heard the wagon master's stories around the campfire, tales meant to frighten the greenhorns about savage Indians who took scalps and tortured captives. Harold Dawson had particular disdain for the Navajo, claiming they were the most treacherous of all the tribes. But Thomas, who had spent time among various tribes during his years prospecting, had quietly told her most of those stories were exaggerations born of fear and misunderstanding. It didn't matter now. Armed or not, she could barely stand, let Alone, fight or flee, the Navajo man made no move toward her. He simply watched, his expression unreadable across the distance that separated them. Rebecca swayed on her feet, fighting the darkness that threatened to swallow her consciousness. The rock dropped from her nerveless fingers. "If you're going to kill me," she called out, her voice a hoarse rasp, "do it quickly!" The man tilted, his head slightly, as if considering her words. Then, with deliberate slowness, he moved toward her, his steps soundless on the hard-packed earth. As he drew closer, Rebecca could see his face clearly. High cheekbones, obsidian eyes that missed. Nothing, skin darkened by sun and wind. He was younger than she had first thought, perhaps 30 or so, with a jagged scar running along his jawline. Key stopped a few paces away, studying her with clinical detachment. His gaze lingered on her wounded shoulder, the torn dress, the way she favored her injured leg. Without a word, he reached for the canteen at his hip. Rebecca flinched instinctively, certain he was drawing a weapon, but he merely held out the canteen, offering it to her. When she didn't move, frozen by surprise and suspicion, he extended his arm further, a hint of impatience crossing his features. Her thirst finally overcame her fear. She took the canteen with trembling hands and raised it to her lips. The water was warm but clean, and it took all her willpower not to gulp it greedily. She forced herself to take small, measured sips, knowing too much too quickly would make her sick. "Thank you," she said, when she had drunk enough to ease the burning. In her throat, she tried to return the canteen, but he made no move to take it. "Keep," he said, the single English word accented but clear. Rebecca clutched the canteen to her chest, its weight reassuring in her hands. "I'm Rebecca Mitchell," she said, uncertain why she felt compelled to introduce herself to this stranger. "My wagon train was attacked 3 days ago. I'm the only one." Her voice faltered. "The only one left." The Navajo's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his dark eyes, recognition perhaps, or understanding. "Kiyazi," he said, touching his chest briefly. Hope flared within her, fragile and desperate. "Can you help me? Is there a settlement nearby? Fort Sullivan, perhaps?" Key shook his head slightly. "No fort. Too far." He gestured to her wounded leg. "You die before." The blunt assessment should have terrified her, but Rebecca found herself oddly grateful for his honesty. At least he wasn't offering false comfort. "My people," he continued, pointing toward the distant mesa, rising dark against the horizon. "There." Rebecca looked where he indicated, trying to gauge the distance. 10 miles? 15? In her condition, it might as well have been 100. "I can't walk that far," she admitted. He considered this, his gaze sweeping over the landscape as if calculating options. Then, with a decisive nod, he moved toward her. Rebecca tensed as he circled behind her, but she was too weak to protest when his arms slipped under her knees and shoulders, lifting her as easily as if she were a child. The world tilted as he picked her up, and Rebecca fought a wave of dizziness. "What are you doing?" she gasped, instinctively clutching at his shirt. "Too slow to walk," he said simply. "Sun kills you." As he began to stride across the terrain with powerful ground-eating steps, Rebecca's mind raced with questions. Why was this man helping her? What awaited her at his village? But exhaustion and pain soon overwhelmed her curiosity, and she surrendered to the rhythm of his movement, her head lolling against his shoulder. The last thing she registered before unconsciousness claimed her was the scent of pine smoke and leather, and the steady, reassuring beat of Kiyazi's heart beneath her ear. When Rebecca next opened her eyes, darkness surrounded her, broken only by the gentle flicker of firelight. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was or how she had gotten there. Then the memories rushed back. The wagon attack, her desperate days in the desert, the Navajo hunter who had found her. She lay on a bed of soft furs, a woven blanket pulled up to her chest. Her wounds had been dressed with some kind of poultice that smelled of herbs and pine. The pain had receded to a dull throb, suggesting someone had given her medicine while she slept. As her eyes adjusted to the dim light, she made out the curved walls of a traditional hogan. The circular dwelling was constructed of logs and earth, with a smoke hole in the center of the domed roof where stars peeked through. Various items hung from the wooden supports, bundles of dried plants, tools, articles of clothing, clay pots, and baskets lined one wall, their contents hidden in shadow. A movement near the fire drew her attention. A woman knelt there, stirring something in a small clay bowl. She was middle-aged, with long black hair streaked with silver at the temples, her face lined but strong. She wore a long dress of deep blue fabric, with intricate silver and turquoise jewelry at her throat and wrists. Rebecca tried to speak, but her throat was painfully dry. All that emerged was a raspy croak. The sound was enough to alert the woman, who looked up sharply, her dark eyes fixing on Rebecca's face. Without a word, she rose and moved to Rebecca's side, bringing a small water jug. With surprising gentleness, she slipped a hand behind Rebecca's head, helping her to drink. The water was cool and sweet, easing the burning in her throat. "Where am I?" Rebecca asked when she could speak. "How long have I been here?" The woman studied her for a moment, as if deciding whether to answer. "Se bin zis gai," she finally said. "2 nights you sleep, fever bad." Her English, while accented, was more fluent than Key's had been. "You saved me," Rebecca said. It wasn't a question. The woman shook her head. "My brother find you. I only make medicine." She returned to the fire, retrieving the bowl she had been stirring. "Drink this now, for pain." Rebecca hesitated, eyeing the dark liquid suspiciously. The woman made an impatient noise. "If want to kill you, already done," she said bluntly. "Easier than making medicine." Despite everything, Rebecca found herself smiling at the woman's pragmatism. She accepted the bowl and drank the bitter contents. It tasted of earth and herbs, with an underlying sweetness that did little to mask its medicinal nature. "I'm Rebecca," she said, returning the empty bowl. "Njoni," the woman replied, touching her chest. "Sister of Key." She moved her hands to Rebecca's bandaged shoulder, checking the dressing with practiced efficiency. "Arrow poison. Very bad." "You strong to live so long?" Rebecca winced as Njoni's fingers probed the wound. "Poison." Njoni nodded grimly. "Renegades use, not Navajo way." She frowned, her face hardening. "Bad men, no honor." "You know who attacked the wagon train?" Njoni's hands stilled momentarily. "Key tracked them before. Men cast out from tribes, live by stealing, killing." She resumed her examination of the wound. "Not our people who do this. Remember that." Rebecca nodded slowly. It made sense. Thomas had often told her that most tribal conflicts with settlers were exaggerated in the retelling, and that much of the violence attributed to native peoples was actually committed by outlaws and renegades from various backgrounds, both native and white. "Where is Key now?" she asked. "Speaking with elders," Njoni replied, moving to check Rebecca's leg wound. "They decide what happens to you." A cold weight settled in Rebecca's stomach. "Decide what?" Njoni looked up, meeting Rebecca's eyes directly. "If you stay or go, if threat or not." She gestured to the bandaged wounds. "For now, you heal. Then they decide." Rebecca tried to sit up, panic flaring. "I'm not a threat to anyone. I just need to reach a settlement, find a way to continue to Silver Creek." Njoni firmly pushed her back down. "No, get up. Wounds open again." Her expression softened slightly. Nearest white town many days travel. Mountains between and renegades still hunt. Woman alone not survive. The reality of her situation struck Rebecca with brutal clarity. Even if the Navajo allowed her to leave, where would she go? How would she survive the journey? She had no weapons, no supplies, no horse, and was badly injured. And waiting at the other end was... what? Thomas's brother, whom she had never met. A mining town where a lone woman would be viewed as either a curiosity or a commodity. "What will happen to me if I stay?" she asked quietly. Nijoni shrugged. "Depends on you. If learn our ways, work hard, maybe find place. If not..." Yunchib didn't finish the sentence, but her meaning was clear. Rebecca lay back, suddenly exhausted despite her long unconsciousness. The herbal drink was taking effect, dulling the pain and bringing with it a heavy drowsiness. "Rest now," Nijoni said, adjusting the blanket over her. "Tomorrow talk more." As sleep reclaimed her, Rebecca's last coherent thought was that she had survived the desert and the arrow wounds against all odds. Somehow, she would find a way to survive this new challenge as well. The days that followed established a routine that was both grueling and oddly comforting in its predictability. Each morning, Rebecca woke before sunrise to help Nijoni gather water from the stream that ran along the base of the plateau where the village was situated. The work was painful at first, the weight of the water jugs pulling at her healing wounds, but she refused to complain or ask for special treatment. After the morning water collection, Nijoni would check and redress Rebecca's wounds, applying fresh poultices of crushed herbs and pine resin. The Navajo woman's hands were gentle but efficient, her face revealing nothing as she worked. "Healing good," she remarked on the fifth morning, studying the arrow wound on Rebecca's shoulder. "Soon, no need bandage." "Thanks to your medicine," Rebecca replied, carefully rotating her shoulder to test its range of motion. The pain had diminished to a dull ache, and she could now raise her arm above her head without wincing. Nijoni made a non-committal sound, but Rebecca thought she detected a flicker of pleasure in the woman's dark eyes. The rest of each day was filled with work, grinding corn between stones, preparing meals, helping to tan hides, or working on the intricate weaving that the Navajo women were renowned for. Rebecca's experience as a school teacher had given her quick hands and a patient temperament, which served her well as she learned these new skills. The women of the village regarded her with varying degrees of suspicion and curiosity. A few, mostly older women with lines of sorrow etched into their faces, were openly hostile, muttering in Navajo whenever she approached. Rebecca later learned from Nijoni that these women had lost children during what they called the Long Walk, a forced relocation by the US Army years earlier that had resulted in hundreds of deaths. Others, particularly the younger women, showed cautious interest in her red gold hair and pale skin. One girl, no more than 16, would follow Rebecca at a distance, watching her work with unconcealed fascination. "Sichai asks why your eyes are the color of sky," the girl said. One afternoon, approaching Rebecca as she hung newly tanned deerskins to dry. Her English was surprisingly good, with only a slight accent. Rebecca smiled at the question. "I was born with them, just as you were born with your brown eyes." The girl nodded seriously. "My grandmother says blue eyes can see spirits. Is true?" "No," Rebecca replied, careful to keep her tone respectful rather than dismissive. "My eyes see the same things yours do." The girl seemed disappointed by this answer. "I am Nasha," she offered after a moment. "It means owl in your language." "It's a beautiful name," Rebecca said. "Do you help with the weaving? I've seen you watching the women at the looms." Nasha's expression brightened. "Yes, I learned to weave from my mother. She is best weaver in village." She hesitated, then added shyly, "I could show you if you want." It was the first friendly, overture Rebecca had received from anyone besides Nijoni, and she accepted eagerly. Under Nasha's patient instruction, she began to learn the basics of Navajo weaving, how to prepare the wool, set up the loom, and create the intricate patterns that told stories through their design. Each pattern has meaning, Nasha explained, guiding Rebecca's hands through the proper motions. This one speaks of rain coming to dry places. This one tells of balance between earth and sky. Rebecca found the work soothing, the rhythmic process allowing her mind to quiet. For hours at a time, she could forget her precarious situation and lose herself in the creation of something beautiful. During these quieter moments, she would sometimes catch sight of Key watching her from a distance. Unlike his sister, who was becoming increasingly talkative as Rebecca proved her willingness to work, Key remained a mystery. He would disappear for days at a time, presumably hunting or scouting, then return without explanation or greeting. On the rare occasions when their paths crossed directly, he would acknowledge her with a slight nod, his dark eyes assessing her progress before moving on. Rebecca found herself unreasonably irritated by his detachment, given that he had been the one to save her life. "Your brother doesn't approve of me being here," she remarked to Nijoni one evening as they prepared the evening meal. Nijoni looked up from the corn cake she was forming. "Key approves. If not, you would not be here." "Then why does he barely speak to me?" A faint smile curved Nijoni's lips. "My brother speaks little to anyone. His thoughts stay inside." She shaped another cake with practiced hands. "But he watches. He sees everything." Rebecca wasn't sure if she found that reassuring or unsettling. As her strength returned, Rebecca began to explore the village and its surroundings, always careful to respect the boundaries that had been set for her. Certain areas, particularly a small structure, set apart from the main dwellings, were clearly off-limits, and she made no attempt to approach them. She learned that the village was home to approximately 200 people, organized by clan relationships that were complex and, to her, initially confusing. Nijoni and Key belonged to the Tachini, or Red Running Into Water clan, which held significant standing in the community. The Navajo life was governed by a concept they called hojo, which Nasha tried to explain to her one afternoon as they collected pine nuts together. "It means beauty, but not just what looks pretty," the girl said, her young face serious as she searched for the right words. "It means everything in balance, in harmony, the right way of seeing, of being." Rebecca considered this. "Like finding peace within yourself and with the world around you?" Nasha brightened. "Yes, that is part. To walk in beauty is to walk in balance with all things." It was a concept that resonated with Rebecca, who had always found conventional religion too rigid for her taste. The idea that harmony and balance constituted a spiritual path appealed to her practical nature. On her 10th day in the village, as Rebecca sat with Nasha learning to string turquoise beads for a ceremonial necklace, a commotion drew their attention. A group of hunters was returning, and from the excited calls, their expedition had been successful. Key led the party, his tall figure unmistakable even at a distance. Across his shoulders he carried a large deer, its lifeless head lolling with each step. Behind him, other hunters brought smaller game, rabbits and what appeared to be wild turkeys. The villagers gathered to welcome the hunters, women coming forward to help with the butchering, children dancing excitedly at the prospect of a feast. Rebecca hung back, uncertain of her place in this celebration. "Come," Nasha urged, pulling at her sleeve. "Everyone helps prepare the meat." Reluctantly, Rebecca followed the girl to where the women were already at work. She had helped butcher animals on her family's small farm as a child, but it had been years since she had done such work. Still, when Nijoni handed her a sharp stone knife and gestured toward a pile of rabbits, she set to the task without complaint. Her movements were slower than the Navajo women's, her technique less practiced, but she worked methodically, wasting nothing as she had been taught. As she finished skinning her third rabbit, she became aware of someone watching her. Looking up, she found Key standing nearby, his expression unreadable as ever. "You do well," he said, the rare compliment catching her off guard. "Many white, women afraid of blood." Rebecca wiped her hands on a cloth, leaving rusty streaks. "I grew up on a farm," she explained, "and later, when Thomas and I lived in mining camps, there were no luxuries like butcher shops." He nodded, seemingly satisfied with this explanation. "Tonight, big meal, special food." He paused, then added, "You are invited." It wasn't until he walked away that Rebecca realized the significance of this invitation. From what she had gathered, communal feasts were reserved for important occasions and typically involved ceremonies that outsiders rarely witnessed. "What is the celebration?" she asked Nijoni when the woman came to check her progress. Nijoni glanced toward where her brother was now helping to prepare the deer. "First hunt of summer season. Very good luck to catch big deer so soon." She gave Rebecca an appraising look. "You come as Key's guest. Honor to you." Rebecca felt a flutter of nervousness. "What should I do? Are there customs I should know about?" Nijoni's mouth curved in what might have been amusement. "Eat, listen, show respect." She handed Rebecca another rabbit. "First, finish work." By evening, the mood in the village had transformed. A large fire burned in the central clearing, surrounded by logs and stones arranged for seating. The scent of roasting meat mingled with the sharp aroma of cedar and sage thrown onto the flames. People wore their finest clothing and jewelry, the firelight gleaming on silver and turquoise adornments. Nasha had brought Rebecca a dress to wear, a simple but beautiful garment of soft deerskin, decorated with intricate beadwork along the neckline and hem. With it came a silver and turquoise bracelet that the girl explained was a loan from her mother. "For special night," Nasha said, helping Rebecca arrange her hair in the Navajo style, pulled back and secured with a strip of woven cloth. When Rebecca emerged from Nijoni's hogan, she felt strangely transformed. The dress was unlike anything she had worn before, looser than the corseted garments she was accustomed to, yet somehow more dignified. The soft leather moved with her body rather than constraining it, and the weight of the bracelet on her wrist reminded her to carry herself with appropriate ceremony. The assembled villagers turned to look as she approached the fire, their expressions ranging from surprise to approval to lingering suspicion. She spotted Key among a group of hunters, his tall figure unmistakable even in the gathering dusk. He wore a finely crafted shirt adorned with porcupine quills and small shells, and silver bands encircled his upper arms. For a moment, their eyes met across the fire, and Rebecca thought she detected a flicker of something, approval, recognition, before he turned away to speak with an elder. Nijoni appeared at her side, radiant in her own ceremonial clothing. "Come, sit here." She guided Rebecca to a place near, but not immediately beside the main circle of elders and important clan members, close enough to be considered part of the celebration, but not so close as to presume equality of status. The feast began with a blessing offered by Elder Hosteen, the oldest man in the village. He spoke in Navajo, his weathered hands moving in graceful gestures that seemed to encompass the fire, the food, the people, and the night sky above. Though Rebecca couldn't understand the words, she felt their reverence and power. Then the food was distributed. Succulent venison, rabbit stew rich with unfamiliar roots and herbs, corn cakes sweetened with pine nuts and dried berries. Rebecca ate carefully, mindful of Nijoni's admonition to show respect. The flavors were complex and delicious, different from anything she had tasted before. As the meal progressed, an atmosphere of relaxed celebration took hold. Children darted between the adults, sneaking extra portions when they thought no one was looking. Men discussed the hunt, their voices animated as they recounted particularly challenging moments. Women talked and laughed together, their earlier reserve toward Rebecca temporarily set aside in the spirit of the feast. When the eating was done, the real ceremony began. Several elders rose to tell stories, their voices rising and falling in the cadence of practiced storytellers. Though most spoke in Navajo, Rebecca was surprised when one elderly woman began a tale in halting but comprehensible English. Long ago, the woman said, her lined face illuminated by the firelight, when the world was new, first man and first woman emerged from the darkness below. They carried with them sacred bundles containing all they would need for life on the surface world: seeds, tools, knowledge of ceremonies. Rebecca listened, entranced as the elder recounted the creation story of the Navajo people. It was both utterly foreign to her Christian upbringing and somehow familiar in its themes of emergence, struggle, and the search for balance. When the storytelling concluded, musicians took their place near the fire. Men with drums and flutes, women with rattles made from gourds and turtle shells began to play. The music was unlike anything Rebecca had heard before, rhythmic, hypnotic, seeming to rise from the earth itself. Dancers moved into the firelight, their steps precise and meaningful. Young men performed what Nasha whispered was a hunting dance, their movements mimicking the stalking of prey, the drawing of a bow, the successful kill. Women followed with a corn-grinding dance, their gestures fluid and graceful as they enacted the rhythm of daily work transformed into ritual. Rebecca watched, mesmerized by the synchronicity of the dancers, the way they moved as if guided by a single mind. She was so absorbed in the spectacle that she didn't notice Key approaching until he stood before her, hand extended in silent invitation. She stared at him in confusion, then looked to Nijoni for guidance. The older woman nodded, encouragingly. "He asks you to join circle dance," she explained. "Everyone participates, even guests." Rebecca hesitated, acutely aware of the eyes upon her. To refuse would be an insult, but she had no knowledge of the steps, no understanding of the movements, significance. "I don't know how," she admitted. Key's expression remained impassive, his hand still extended. "Follow others," he said simply. "Not difficult." Taking a deep breath, Rebecca placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and calloused, as he led her to where others were forming a large circle around the fire. Nasha appeared on her other side, taking her free hand with an encouraging smile. "Like this," the girl whispered, demonstrating a simple sidestep that matched the drum's rhythm. "Just feel beat." As the music intensified, Rebecca allowed herself to be guided by the circle's movement. The dance was indeed simple, a flowing pattern of steps that carried the group in a clockwise direction around the fire. What made it powerful was not complexity but unity, the shared pulse of many people moving as one. Gradually, Rebecca relaxed into the rhythm, her initial self-consciousness fading. The firelight, the music, the steady pressure of hands holding hers created a strange sense of belonging that she hadn't expected to feel. For a brief time, she wasn't an outsider, but part of something larger, connected to these people and to the land that sustained them. When the dance ended, participants returning to their places around the fire, Rebecca found herself breathless, not from exertion, but from emotion. She glanced at Key, who still stood beside her, and was startled to see him watching her with an intensity that hadn't been there before. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for including me." He nodded once, the firelight casting shadows across the planes of his face. "You dance well, open heart." Then, before she could respond, he moved away to rejoin the hunters. Nijoni appeared at her side, a rare smile softening her usually stern features. "My brother, right. You dance with open heart." She handed Rebecca a cup of something warm and fragrant. "Good sign." "A sign of what?" Rebecca asked, sipping the beverage, which tasted of herbs and honey. Nijoni's dark eyes were thoughtful. "That maybe you begin to understand Hojo, to see beauty in balance." She gestured toward the circle of people around the fire, to find place in circle, even when different. Rebecca considered this as she watched the celebration continue around her. Was it possible to find a place here, among people so different from those she had known all her life? Could she learn not just their skills and customs, but their way of seeing the world? The moon rose higher, casting silver light over the village. Children began to drift off to sleep, carried home by parents or older siblings. Elders retired to their hogans, leaving the younger adults to continue the celebration. Rebecca, exhausted from the day's activities and the emotional intensity of the evening, made her way back to Nijoni's dwelling. As she settled onto her sleeping mat, she found herself thinking of Thomas and what he would make of her current situation. He had always been more adaptable than she, more willing to embrace the unfamiliar. During their years together, he had taught her to be the same, to face new challenges with an open mind rather than fear or judgment. If he were here now, he would likely be fascinated by Navajo culture, eager to learn their language and customs. "I'm trying, Thomas," she whispered into the darkness. "I'm trying to be brave, like you always said I was." Outside, the drums continued their heartbeat rhythm, a sound that had once seemed alien, but now felt strangely comforting as she drifted into sleep. The chill of dawn seeped through the Hogan's walls, waking Rebecca from uneasy dreams filled with screams and dust. She blinked in the grey half-light, momentarily disoriented before remembering where she was. 2 weeks had passed since Key had carried her, half dead, to his village. 2 weeks of healing, of learning, of gradually finding a tentative place. Among people who regarded her with emotions ranging from curiosity to outright suspicion. She sat up, stretching carefully. Her wounds had healed remarkably under Nijoni's care, leaving only pink scars where the poisoned arrows had pierced her. Flesh. The fever was long gone, and each day brought new strength to her limbs. With physical recovery came a clearer understanding of her situation and the decisions that loomed before her. Today marked the day of reckoning that Elder Hostine had spoken of when she first arrived. The moon had completed its cycle, growing from a thin crescent to full and waning again to new. Today, the elders would determine whether she could remain in the village or must leave to seek her fortune elsewhere. Rebecca rose quietly, careful not to disturb Nijoni, who still slept, on her pallet across the hogan. She dressed in the buckskin garments that had replaced her tattered calico, pulling on the soft moccasins that she had helped to make under Nasha's patient guidance. The clothing felt natural now, the unfamiliar cut and materials having become a second skin. Outside, the village was stirring to life. Women moved toward the stream with water jugs balanced on their hips. Men gathered to discuss the day's hunting or trading expeditions. Children chased each other between the hogans, their laughter like wind chimes in the cool morning air. Rebecca moved toward the communal cooking area, where breakfast preparations were underway. Several women looked up as she approached, their expressions guarded but no longer openly hostile. She had earned a measure of acceptance through her willingness to work, to learn, to contribute without complaint. "Morning meal needs more wood," an older woman named Tadi said in broken English, gesturing to the dwindling pile near the cooking fire. Rebecca nodded and headed toward the wood cache at the edge of the village. This was a test, she knew, not of her strength or skill, but of her willingness to perform menial tasks without being treated as an honored guest. She had passed many such tests over the past fortnight, earning small nods of approval from those who had initially been most skeptical of her presence. As she gathered an armload of split juniper logs, she caught sight of Key emerging from the ceremonial hogan where the elders often gathered. His face was somber, his shoulders set in a rigid line that suggested tension. When he spotted her, he changed direction, coming toward her with purposeful strides. "Council meets after morning meal," he said without preamble. "They will speak with you." Rebecca's arms tightened around the firewood. What will they decide? Key's expression remained unreadable. "I spoke for you. Told them you work hard, learn quickly, that you respect our ways." "But," she prompted, sensing hesitation in his words, "some still fear you bring trouble. White soldiers look for missing settlers. If find you here..." He left the implication. Hanging. Rebecca understood the concern. Relations between the Navajo and the U.S. Army were precarious at best. If a military patrol discovered that the tribe had harbored a white woman, even one they had rescued, it could be interpreted as kidnapping or worse. "What do you think will happen?" she asked quietly. For the first time, Key's impassive mask slipped, revealing a flicker of uncertainty. "I do not know. Bring wood, then eat. Be ready when called." He turned to leave, then paused. "You have courage, Rebecca Mitchell. Remember that." Before she could respond, he strode away, leaving her with an armload of wood and a hollowness. In the pit of her stomach, she returned to the cooking fire, depositing the logs where they were needed, and accepted a bowl of corn porridge sweetened with dried berries. The food tasted like ash in her mouth, but she forced herself to eat, knowing she would need her strength. Around her, the village continued its morning rhythm, but she noticed sidelong glances, whispered conversations that ceased when she drew near. Everyone knew that today was the day of decision, and speculation ran rampant about what would become of the white woman in their midst. Nasha appeared at her side, settling beside her with her own breakfast bowl. "Do not worry," the girl said, with the optimism of youth. "They will let you stay." Rebecca managed a smile. "I hope you're right. My father says you have learned well, that you do not complain or demand special treatment like other white people he has known." "Your father?" Rebecca asked, surprised. Nasha had spoken of her mother often, but never her father. The girl nodded toward a group of men preparing for a hunting expedition. "Key is my father." Rebecca nearly choked on her porridge. In all these days, neither Key nor Nijoni had mentioned this relationship. She stared at the girl. Suddenly, seeing the resemblance, the same high cheekbones, the same intense gaze, though Nasha's was warmed by youth and natural exuberance. "I didn't know," she said when she could speak again. Nasha shrugged. "My mother died when I was small. Sickness. That came from white traders. Nijoni raised me, but Key is my father." She spoke matter-of-factly, without the self-pity that many white children might have shown when discussing their orphaned status. Rebecca's mind raced with this new information. If Key had lost his wife to a disease brought by white settlers, his willingness to help her was even more remarkable. She wondered if his reticence toward her stemmed partly from this old grief. Before she could pursue this line of thought, Nijoni appeared, her face solemn. "Council ready?" she said. "Come now." Rebecca's heart hammered against her ribs as she rose to follow Key's sister. Nasha squeezed her hand briefly, then released it, watching with solemn eyes as Rebecca was led toward the large ceremonial hogan where the elders awaited. The interior of the hogan was dimly lit, with thin shafts of sunlight penetrating through the smoke hole and entrance. A fire burned in the central pit, its smoke rising in a lazy spiral. Around it sat 7 elders, 4 men and 3 women, their faces lined with age and experience, their eyes sharp and evaluating as Rebecca entered. Elder Hosteen occupied the position of honor, opposite the entrance. His white hair was braided with small turquoise and shell beads, and he wore a ceremonial blanket despite the growing warmth of the day. To his right sat a woman Rebecca recognized. As the eldest female in the village, her face a testament to 9 decades of desert sun and hard work. Nijoni guided Rebecca to a spot across the fire from the elders, then retreated to stand near the entrance. Key was already present, standing to one side, his face an expressionless mask once more. For several long moments, no one spoke. The silence stretched until Rebecca felt compelled to break it. But something in Nijoni's earlier instructions, listen first, speak only when asked, held her tongue. Finally, Elder Hostine raised a gnarled hand. "Rebecca Mitchell," he said, his English clear despite his advanced age. "You have lived among the Dene for 1 cycle of the moon. You have eaten our food, slept in our dwellings, learned our ways." His dark eyes seemed to look through her rather than at her. "Now we must decide if these things continue." Rebecca inclined her head respectfully, but remained silent. "Some say you should go," the elder continued. "That your presence brings danger from soldiers who will believe we have taken you against your will." Murmurs of agreement came from several of the council members. "Others say you have shown respect and willingness to contribute, that you could have value to our people with your knowledge of white ways and your skills with teaching." This statement was met with thoughtful nods from the female elders. "I have listened to all words spoken about you," Hostine said. "Now I wish to hear from your own lips. Why should we allow you to remain among us?" Rebecca took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "I am grateful for the life that was returned to me through Kiyazi's compassion and Nijoni's healing skills. I owe a debt that I cannot repay by leaving." She paused, meeting the elder's steady gaze. "But more than gratitude keeps me here. In the time I have spent among your people, I have found something I thought lost forever when my husband died. Purpose, community, a way of living that values harmony above possession." She gestured toward the village beyond the Hogan walls. "Out there in the white settlements, I would be pitied as a widow, valued only for what a new husband might see in me. Here, I'm valued for my work, my skills, my willingness to learn and contribute." Her voice strengthened with conviction. "I do not wish to be a burden or bring danger to those who have shown me kindness. But if permitted to stay, I would devote myself to serving this community that has given me a second chance at life." The elders listened without interruption, their expressions giving nothing away. When she finished speaking, silence fell once more, broken only by the soft crackle of the fire. Finally, the elderly woman to Hostine's right spoke, her Navajo translated in a low voice by one of the younger male elders. "You speak well, but words are easy. Actions show truth. What skills do you bring that we need?" Rebecca considered the question. "I was a teacher before I married. I could teach English, reading, writing, tools that might help your people negotiate with white authorities or traders." She hesitated, then added, "I've noticed that some of the younger children are developing coughs that concern me. I know remedies for chest ailments that might complement your own healing traditions." The woman nodded thoughtfully, then spoke again, her words once more translated. "And when a husband is found for you among our men, will you then reject our ways as beneath you?" Heat crept into Rebecca's cheeks at the directness of the question. "I do not seek a husband," she said carefully. "My time with Thomas was a blessing, but that chapter of my life is closed. I wish to stand on my own strength, to contribute as myself, not as someone's wife." This answer caused a stir among the elders. The translator leaned forward, his voice low but firm. "Our women are valued for their strength, but all are part of families, of clans. To be alone is not our way. Rebecca glanced at Key, whose face remained impassive, then back to the council. I understand. I would be honored to be considered part of a clan, to have a place within your kinship systems. But I do not wish to marry again, not now, perhaps, not ever. Elder Hostine raised a hand, stilling the murmurs of conversation. This is a matter for another time. He fixed Rebecca with a penetrating gaze. There is one question that must be answered before all others. If soldiers come searching for survivors of the wagon train, what will you tell them of how you came to be among us? The question hung in the air, its significance unmistakable. Rebecca knew that her answer could mean life or death, not just for herself, but potentially for the entire village. If soldiers believed she had been captured rather than rescued, it could trigger a military response against the Navajo, regardless of their innocence. I would tell them the truth, she said firmly, that I was wounded and dying in the desert after an attack by renegades. That Kiyazi found me and brought me here, where I was healed and treated with kindness. That I remain of my own free will. She leaned forward slightly, emphasizing her next words. And I would make it absolutely clear that the attack on the wagon train was not carried out by Navajo, but by bandits who prey on both your people and mine. Elder Hostine's eyes narrowed slightly. And if they do not believe you, if they insist, you return with them regardless of your wishes? Rebecca hadn't expected this question, and it gave her pause. What would she do if forced to leave? The thought of returning to white society, with its rigid expectations and thinly veiled contempt for women who stepped outside prescribed roles, filled her with a dread she hadn't anticipated. If forced, I would go, she admitted finally. But I would return if permitted. And while among the white settlements, I would speak truth about the Dine, that you are not the savages of campfire tales, but people of honor and wisdom who saved a life you could have easily ignored. A long silence followed her words. The Idus elders exchanged glances, communicating in a subtle language of expressions and small gestures that Rebecca couldn't interpret. Finally, Elder Hostine spoke again. We have heard your words. Now you will leave while we consider them. He made a dismissive gesture, and Nijoni stepped forward to lead Rebecca from the hogan. Outside, the morning had warmed considerably, the sun climbing toward its zenith in a cloudless sky. Rebecca blinked in the sudden brightness, her heart still pounding from the intensity of the council meeting. What happens now? She asked Nijoni as they walked away from the ceremonial hogan. They talk. Maybe long time. Nijoni's face revealed nothing of her own thoughts on the matter. You wait. Do regular work. Show not anxious. Rebecca almost laughed at the impossibility of appearing unconcerned while her entire future hung in the balance. But she understood the message. Continuing her duties would demonstrate respect for the council's process and confidence in her place within the community. So she joined a group of women preparing deer hides for tanning, her hands working methodically as her mind raced with possibilities. If the council decided against her, where would she go? The nearest white settlement was many days' journey through dangerous territory. Even if she reached it safely, what awaited her there? A life of dependence on the charity of strangers, or perhaps a hasty marriage to any man willing to take on. A widow without dowry or connections. The alternatives seemed equally bleak. Yet as her fingers worked the soft hide, scraping away remnants of flesh with a stone tool, she realized that her apprehensions stemmed not just from practical concerns about survival. Somewhere in these past weeks, she had begun to feel a connection to this place, these people. The thought of leaving created an ache that surprised her with its intensity. Hours passed as the council deliberated. Rebecca moved from task to task, helping where needed, always aware of the curious glances cast her way. Everyone knew what was happening, and speculation ran through the village like wind through grass. Nasha found her as she was helping to repair a torn hide covering for one of the Hogans. The girl's expression was solemn, missing its usual brightness. "The council still talks," she said, settling beside Rebecca and taking up a bone needle to assist with the repairs. "My father speaks strongly for you." Rebecca's hands stilled momentarily. "He does," Nasha nodded. "He says you have warrior spirit, that you faced death without fear and learned our ways without complaint." She glanced at Rebecca sidelong. "He does not give praise easily." "I've noticed," Rebecca said dryly, resuming her stitching. "My mother was like you," Nasha continued, her voice softening. "Strong, not afraid of new things. When sickness came, she fought hard, but—" She trailed off, her young face momentarily shadowed with old grief. Rebecca reached out impulsively, covering the girl's hand with her own. "I'm sure she was brave and beautiful, like her daughter." Nasha's smile returned, though dimmed. "Father says I have her laugh." She hesitated, then added in a rush, "I hope they let you stay. I like teaching you to weave, and you tell good stories from your school days." "I hope so too," Rebecca admitted. The sun had begun its descent toward the western horizon when Najoni finally appeared, her expression grave. "Council finished," she said simply. "They call you now." Rebecca's heart leapt into her throat as she set aside her work and rose to follow. As they walked toward the ceremonial Hogan, she caught sight of Key standing near the entrance, his tall figure unmistakable. Something in his posture, a slight tension in his shoulders, a stillness in his stance, suggested that the council's decision might not have gone as he'd hoped. Steeling herself for disappointment, Rebecca entered the Hogan once more. The elders sat as before, their faces illuminated by the golden late-afternoon light filtering through the smoke hole. Elder Hostine gestured for her to sit across from them, and she complied, folding her legs beneath her with a grace that had come from weeks of practice. "Rebecca Mitchell," the old man began, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "We have considered your words and the words of those who have observed you during your time among us. We have weighed the risks and benefits of allowing you to remain." He paused, his dark eyes searching her face. "Our decision was not made lightly or quickly." Rebecca held her breath, waiting. "You may stay," Hostine pronounced, "but with conditions." Relief washed over her, so powerful that for a moment she feared she might embarrass herself with tears. She bowed her head to hide the emotion, managing a steady "thank you" when she could trust her voice again. "Hear the conditions before you thank us," one of the other male elders said, his English heavily accented but clear. "First, you must be adopted into a clan. Without family ties, you have no place in our world." Rebecca nodded her understanding. This was not unexpected given the earlier discussion. "Second," the elder continued, "you must contribute to the well-being of the village through teaching the children English and writing, as you offered. Knowledge of white ways may help our young ones survive in a changing world." Again, Rebecca nodded. Teaching had been her calling before circumstances had led her west with Thomas. The prospect of returning to it brought unexpected joy. Third, you must understand that if danger comes because of your presence, the council will reconsider this decision. His expression was grave. The safety of the many must outweigh the needs of one. "I understand," Rebecca said solemnly. "I would not wish to bring harm to those who have shown me kindness." Elder Hostine raised a hand. "There is one more matter, the question of clan adoption." He gestured toward the entrance, and Rebecca turned to see Key step into the Hogan, his expression as unreadable as ever. Kiyazi has offered to have you adopted into the Tachini, his clan. This is unusual, as you have no blood ties to our people, but not without precedent. Rebecca looked at Ki in surprise. He met her gaze steadily, but offered no explanation for his decision. This adoption would make you kin to Ki, to Nijoni, to Nasha, Hosteen continued. It would give you a place within our kinship systems and the protection of their family line. Do you accept this honor? Rebecca's throat tightened with unexpected emotion. I do, she said, her voice husky, with gratitude and respect. Hosteen nodded, seeming satisfied. Then it is decided. The ceremony of adoption will take place at the new moon 5 days from now. He made a gesture of dismissal. Preparations must be made. Go now and reflect on the commitment you have made this day. As Rebecca left the hogan, blinking in the late afternoon sunlight, she felt oddly weightless, as if some burden had been lifted from her shoulders. The uncertainty that had shadowed her since the wagon attack, the question of where she belonged, of how she would survive, had been answered, at least for now. Ki emerged from the hogan behind her, his steps silent on the packed earth. For a moment they stood side by side, watching the everyday activities of the village continue around them. Thank you, Rebecca said finally, for speaking for me in council, for offering clan adoption. Ki's gaze remained fixed on the distant mountains, now painted in shades of purple and gold by the setting sun. You saved yourself, he said quietly, by showing respect, by working hard. My words only confirmed what elders already saw. Still, I'm grateful. She hesitated, then asked the question that had puzzled her since Nasha's revelation. Why? Didn't you tell me that Nasha is your daughter? A faint smile flickered across his face. You did not ask. Then, more seriously, you needed to form your own opinion of her, of all of us, without knowing ties. Rebecca considered this. She told me about her mother. I'm sorry for your loss. Ki's expression shuttered, the brief openness gone. Long time ago, he turned to face her fully. Adoption is serious, makes you family. You understand this? I do. Then be ready. Next day's busy with preparation. Without further elaboration, he strode away, leaving Rebecca to ponder what exactly she had committed herself to. Nijoni approached, having waited at a respectful distance during their conversation. So, you stay? Her tone was neutral, but Rebecca thought she detected a hint of approval in the older woman's eyes. Yes, and I'm to be adopted into your clan. Nijoni nodded. Good. Better than alternatives council considered. What alternatives? A rare smile curved Nijoni's lips. Some suggested marriage instead of adoption. Old Begay offered 3 horses for you. Rebecca's eyes widened in shock. Marriage? To whom? Does not matter now. Ki said no. Nijoni started walking toward their shared hogan, clearly expecting Rebecca to follow. Come. Much to do before ceremony. You need proper clothing, learn proper words. As they walked, Rebecca glanced back toward where Ki had disappeared among the hogans. The enigmatic Navajo hunter continued to surprise her, first by saving her life, then by advocating for her with the council, and now by offering clan adoption, rather than allowing her to be married off to secure her place in the community. She wondered not for the first time what thoughts moved behind those dark, guarded eyes. And she wondered, with a flutter of something like anticipation, what this new chapter of her life would bring as an adopted member of the Tachini clan. The new moon hung delicately in the twilight sky, a sliver of silver against deepening indigo. Rebecca stood at the edge of the stream that bordered the Navajo settlement, her reflection wavering in the current as she filled her water jug. 5 days had passed since the council had approved her adoption into the Tachini clan. 5 days of preparation for the ceremony that would formalize her place among these people who had begun as strangers and were becoming, improbably, family. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency now, dipping the clay jug into the swiftest part of the current where the water ran cleanest. The morning air held a lingering chill, despite the promise of heat in the cloudless sky. Spring was yielding to summer, the desert landscape transforming subtly around them. Flowers appeared briefly after rare rains, their vibrant blossoms a stark contrast to the ochre earth. Game was more plentiful as animals emerged from winter, scarcity making the hunter's tasks easier. Rebecca straightened, balancing the heavy jug against her hip the way she'd seen Navajo women do. Her shoulder, once torn by a poisoned arrow, now ached only slightly with the strain. Nijoni's healing skills had proven remarkable, the herbal poultices and tinctures more effective than any medicine Rebecca had encountered in white settlements. As she turned to carry the water back to the village, a flutter of movement caught her eye. A lone figure stood on the ridge above the stream, silhouetted against the brightening sky. Even at this distance, Rebecca recognized Key's distinctive stance, shoulders squared, head slightly tilted as he surveyed the land before him. He often disappeared before dawn, returning with game or information about neighboring territories. His role as hunter was only one facet of his importance to the village. He was also scout, protector, and, though he rarely spoke in council meetings, a respected voice when he chose to use it. Rebecca hesitated, watching him. Despite his central role in her rescue and his advocacy for her adoption into his clan, Key remained something of an enigma. Their interactions were primarily practical. Instructions about village customs, brief explanations of taboos she should avoid, occasional corrections to her attempts at the Navajo language. Yet beneath this utilitarian exchange, she sensed deeper currents she couldn't quite fathom. As if sensing her scrutiny, Key turned. Even across the distance separating them, their eyes met. He remained motionless for a moment, then raised a hand in acknowledgement before disappearing over the ridge. Rebecca continued toward the village, where morning activities were already underway. Women tended cooking fires while men gathered to discuss hunting plans or repair tools. Children darted between hogans, their laughter carrying on the morning breeze. It was a scene of domestic tranquility that belied the complex social structures and survival imperatives underlying every action. Nijoni awaited her at their shared hogan, grinding corn for the morning meal. Unlike many in the village who still regarded Rebecca with varying degrees of suspicion, Key's sister had gradually warmed to her presence. The older woman's initial brusqueness had given way to a gruff sort of mentorship, her corrections and instructions carrying an undercurrent of approval when Rebecca performed tasks well. "Water fresh?" Nijoni asked, not looking up from her work. "Yes, the stream is running clear after yesterday's rain." Rebecca set the jug in its designated spot, then joined Nijoni at the grinding stone. "What else needs to be done for the ceremony?" "Much," Nijoni replied, surrendering half the grinding space. "Your ceremonial dress needs final beadwork. Sacred herbs must be gathered, special food prepared." She glanced at Rebecca with an appraising eye. "You nervous?" Rebecca smiled wryly. "Is it that obvious? Your hands shake little bit when you speak of ceremony." "I don't want to make mistakes. To dishonor the clan by doing something wrong." Nijoni made a dismissive sound. "Elders guide you through ritual. Just follow instructions. Show respect. Speak from heart." She paused in her grinding. "But first, more important thing to discuss." Something in her tone made Rebecca look up sharply. "What is it?" "After adoption, where you live." The question caught Rebecca off guard. She had assumed she would continue to share Nijoni's hogan, as she had since her arrival. "I hadn't thought about it. Would I not stay here?" Nijoni shook her head. "Clan sister needs own dwelling, or share with family." She resumed grinding, her strong hands moving rhythmically. "Options must be considered." What options? Rebecca asked, trying to hide her confusion. The intricacies of Navajo social structure still occasionally eluded her, despite her efforts to understand. Could share Hogan with widow Tardy and her daughter, or elderly Chi, who lives alone since sons built separate dwelling. Nijoni glanced at Rebecca sideways. Or could build new Hogan, if married. Rebecca nearly dropped the grinding stone. Married? I'm not. There isn't. She stumbled over the words, heat rising to her cheeks. I have no interest in remarrying. Nijoni's expression revealed nothing. Several men have expressed interest. Herder Benali has 5 sheep, good provider. Huntanez is younger but strong, skilled with bow. Nijoni, I'm not looking for a husband, Rebecca said firmly. I'm still learning your ways, finding my place here. Marriage is the furthest thing from my mind. Key's sister studied her for a long moment, then nodded as if confirming something to herself. As you wish. We'll speak to Tardy about sharing Hogan then. She gathered the ground corn into a clay bowl. Now come. Much preparation still needed. The day passed in a blur of activity. Rebecca moved from task to task under Nijoni's direction, helping to prepare the ceremonial foods, assisting with the final decorations on her adoption garments, learning the ritual phrases she would need to speak. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, she found herself surrounded by the women of the village, all contributing to her preparation in ways both practical and symbolic. Nasha, who had become a constant companion during Rebecca's language lessons, arrived with a small bundle of wildflowers. For your hair, she explained, presenting them proudly. My grandmother says flowers help spirits recognize good intentions. Thank you, Rebecca said, touched by the gesture. Will you help me place them properly? The girl nodded eagerly, her young face solemn with the responsibility. As she wove the delicate blossoms into Rebecca's auburn hair, she spoke softly of her own adoption ceremony years earlier, not into the clan, as she had been born to it, but into womanhood after her first moon cycle. I was so afraid of making mistakes, she confided. But Elder Hosteen says mistakes in ceremony are just spirits testing our faith. If we continue with good heart, they forgive. Rebecca smiled at this wisdom, finding comfort in the knowledge that perfect performance was not the primary expectation. Your father doesn't speak of spiritual matters often, she observed, curious about this aspect of Key's character. Nasha's hands stilled momentarily. Father keeps sacred thoughts private, but he follows old ways strictly. She resumed her work, adding, he says you understand respect for traditions better than most white people. Before Rebecca could respond to this unexpected insight, Nijoni entered carrying the ceremonial dress Rebecca would wear that evening. The garment was a work of art, buckskin dyed a rich earth red and decorated with intricate beadwork along the neckline and hem. Symbols of the Tachiini clan had been worked into the design, zigzag patterns representing running water, cloud formations promising rain, abstract depictions of mountains and earth. Many hands made this, Nijoni said, laying the dress carefully across a woven blanket. Elder women did beadwork, young ones prepared hide, even children helped gather dye plants. She touched a particular pattern near the shoulder. This is protection symbol, keeps evil spirits away. Rebecca ran her fingers over the meticulous handwork, overwhelmed by the effort that had gone into creating this ceremonial garment. It's beautiful, she whispered. I don't deserve such craftsmanship. Not about deserving, Nijoni replied matter-of-factly. About belonging. Clan takes care of own. She gestured for Rebecca to stand. Time to prepare. Sunset soon. With Nijoni and Nasha's help, Rebecca bathed in water infused with purifying herbs, then donned the ceremonial dress. The soft buckskin settled against her skin like a second layer, the weight of the beadwork grounding her somehow. Moccasins, decorated with similar clan symbols, completed the outfit, along with a belt of silver conchos that had been loaned by a clan elder's wife. As dusk descended, transforming the landscape into a symphony of purples and golds, Rebecca was led toward the center of the village where the ceremony would take place. Her heart pounded against her ribs, nervousness mingling with an unexpected sense of rightness that surprised her with its intensity. The village had gathered around a central fire built higher than usual for the occasion. Faces flickered in the firelight, some friendly, others still reserved, all watching with interest as she approached. Children whispered behind their hands. Elderly women nodded approvingly at her appearance. Men evaluated with stoic expressions. Elder Hostine stood at the north side of the fire, his ceremonial attire marking him as the spiritual leader of the gathering. Beside him stood 3 senior members of the Tachini clan, each holding symbolic items for the ritual. Of Key, there was no sign, which struck Rebecca as odd, given his role in proposing her adoption. Nijoni guided Rebecca to stand before the elders, then stepped back to join other clan members. For a moment, Rebecca felt acutely alone, a stranger still, despite weeks of integration into village life. Then Hostine raised his hands, and a hush fell over the gathering. "We come together," he began, his voice carrying clearly, despite his advanced age, to witness what was once rare but is not unknown to our people. A stranger who becomes kin, a soul born to one people who finds home with another. Murmurs of acknowledgement rose from the assembled villagers. "Rebecca Mitchell came to us between life and death," Hostine continued, "found by Ki Yazi, healed by Nijoni, taught by many hands. She has shown respect for our customs, willingness to learn our skills, courage in facing hardship. These are qualities of the Diné." He turned to address Rebecca directly. "To become Tachini is to take on responsibilities as well as protections. You must honor clan traditions, respect kinship rules, contribute to community welfare. You understand these obligations?" "I do," Rebecca replied, her voice steadier than she had expected. "I accept them with gratitude and an open heart." Hostine nodded, seeming satisfied. He gestured toward the eastern edge of the circle, and a stirring went through the crowd. Rebecca turned to see Key finally making his appearance, but not alone. Behind him walked several clan members, and in his arms he carried something that made her breath catch in her throat. A baby. Small, perhaps 3 or 4 months old, wrapped in a finely woven blanket and sleeping peacefully against Key's chest. As he approached, Rebecca fought to keep her expression neutral, despite her confusion. No one had mentioned a child's involvement in the adoption ceremony. Was this a symbolic element of the ritual? A blessing of some kind? "Who speaks for this? Woman's adoption?" Hostine asked formally. Key stepped forward, careful not to disturb the sleeping infant. "I, Ki Yazi, speak for her. I found her between worlds and brought her to our fire. I have watched her learn our ways and work with willing hands. I offer her the protection of Tachini." The clan members behind him murmured agreement, stepping forward to form a semicircle of support. Hostine nodded, then asked, "What bond will secure her place among you?" Rebecca held her breath, uncertain what was expected. She had been taught the ritual phrases she would speak, the symbolic gifts she would receive, but nothing about a bond had been mentioned in her preparations. Key shifted the sleeping infant carefully in his arms. "She will mother the orphaned one," he said, his voice carrying across the now silent gathering. "Little Dawn, whose mother passed to the spirit world during birth, whose father fell to renegade arrows 3 weeks past. The same who took Rebecca's people. A ripple of surprise moved through the crowd. Even Hostine's impassive face showed momentary astonishment before settling back into ceremonial dignity. Rebecca stared at the infant, then at Key, shock rendering her speechless. This had not been discussed, not even hinted at in all the preparations for the ceremony. "Is this your wish?" Hostine asked her, his tone making it clear that refusal was possible. Rebecca looked at the sleeping child, its dark lashes resting against round cheeks, one tiny fist curled against the blanket's edge. The baby's mother dead in childbirth, its father killed by the same renegades who had attacked the wagon train, a life as precarious as her own had been when Key found her in the desert. Her thoughts flew to the hopes she had once harbored of motherhood. Dreams that had dimmed after years of marriage to Thomas had produced no children. Dreams she had set aside when she embarked on the perilous journey west. "Yes," she heard herself say, the single word emerging with quiet certainty. "If the clan permits it, I would be honored to care for this child." Hostine turned to address the gathered Navajo. "The clan has heard her acceptance. Are there any who object to this adoption of the woman or her acceptance of the orphaned one?" Silence greeted his question, though Rebecca noticed several of the older women exchanging significant glances. Whether they approved or disapproved was impossible to tell from their inscrutable expressions. "Then let it be done," Hostine declared. He gestured for Key to bring the infant forward. With careful movements, Key transferred the sleeping child into Rebecca's arms. The baby stirred but did not wake, one tiny fist curling against the soft buckskin of Rebecca's ceremonial dress. A wave of protectiveness washed over her, so intense it took her breath away. "This child is now yours to raise in the ways of the Diné," Hostine intoned. "To teach our language, our stories, our respect for the balance of all things. Do you accept this sacred duty?" Rebecca tore her gaze away from the infant's face. "I do," she said, "though I will need help to teach what I am still learning myself." This honest admission brought nods of approval from several clan members, including, surprisingly, old Tadi, who had been among the most skeptical of Rebecca's presence. "The clan will guide you," Hostine assured her. "Now, speak the words of acceptance." Nijoni had taught her the ritual phrases, making her repeat them until they flowed naturally, despite their unfamiliar sounds and cadences. Rebecca spoke them now, her voice gaining strength as she progressed through the ancient formula that bound her to the Tachiini clan, to its ancestors and descendants, to its obligations and honors. The ceremony continued with clan members coming forward to place symbolic gifts at her feet: a small pottery jar filled with seeds representing prosperity, a bundle of healing herbs symbolizing health, a finely crafted knife signifying protection. Each gift was accompanied by brief words of welcome or advice. Nasha was among the last to approach, her young face solemn with the importance of the moment. She carried a small cradle board, beautifully decorated with symbols of the Tachiini clan. "For little Dawn," she said, presenting it to Rebecca. "I made it with my own hands, as my mother made mine." She leaned forward to whisper, "This makes us sisters now. I will help you with the baby." Rebecca blinked back tears at the girl's earnest offer. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll need all the help I can get." As the ritual concluded, the gathering transitioned into celebration. Food was shared, music played on drums and flutes, stories told around the central fire. Rebecca found herself seated with her new family group, Nijoni on one side, Nasha on the other, little Dawn sleeping peacefully in her cradleboard nearby. Many villagers approached to offer congratulations or simply to observe the unusual new mother-child pair. Some, particularly the older women, offered practical advice on infant care. Others asked polite questions about how Rebecca planned to balance her teaching duties with motherhood. Through it all, Rebecca was acutely aware of Key watching from a distance, his expression unreadable in the firelight. When the celebration began to wind down and families with young children drifted toward their hogans, Key finally approached. He settled beside Rebecca with the fluid grace that characterized his movements, his gaze fixed on little Dawn's sleeping form. "Why didn't you tell me?" Rebecca asked quietly, the question that had burned in her mind throughout the ceremony finally finding voice. "About the baby, about becoming her mother. This isn't something that should have come as a surprise." He was silent for a long moment, his profile sharp against the dying firelight. "Would you have agreed if given time to worry, to doubt?" he finally asked, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "That should have been my choice to make," Rebecca countered, keeping her own voice even despite the flare of anger. "Not a decision forced upon me in front of the entire village." "Not forced," Key corrected. "Hostine asked if it was your wish. You could have said no." Rebecca sighed, recognizing the truth in his words while still resenting the method. "Her parents," she said after a moment, "tell me about them." Key's expression softened almost imperceptibly as he looked at the sleeping infant. "Her mother was my cousin, Many Birds. Strong woman, skilled weaver. She knew baby would come hard, signs were not good. Asked me to find good mother if she died." His mouth tightened briefly. "Her husband, Grey Wolf, was trader. Good man. Went to Fort Sullivan for supplies. Renegades attacked on return journey. Same who took your wagon train." "So she's your blood kin," Rebecca said, understanding dawning. "That's why you've taken such interest in her fate." Key nodded. "In our way, all clan are blood. But yes, closer tie." He finally turned to meet her gaze directly. "You angry?" Rebecca considered the question, looking down at the peaceful face of the child, who was now, according to Navajo law and custom, her daughter. The anger that had flared at Key's presumption was already fading, replaced by a complex tangle of emotions, apprehension about her ability to mother a child in this unfamiliar culture, determination to honor the responsibility she had accepted, and beneath it all, a surprising current of joy. "I'm not angry," she said finally, "but in the future, Key Yazzie, I would appreciate being consulted about life-changing decisions before they're announced to the entire village." Something that might have been amusement flickered in his dark eyes. "Noted," he said, with a slight inclination of his head that managed to be both acknowledgement and mild challenge. "Come, late now. Dawn will wake hungry before morning sun." As they gathered the gifts and prepared to depart the celebration, Nijoni approached with news that further complicated the evening's revelations. "Tadi says no room in Hogan now with baby," she informed Rebecca, her expression neutral. "Must make other arrangement." Rebecca stared at her in disbelief. "But where am I supposed to go? The ceremony just ended, and I'm suddenly homeless as well as an unexpected mother." Nijoni shrugged, though Rebecca thought she detected a hint of something, collusion perhaps, in the older woman's eyes. "Can stay with us tonight. Tomorrow, village will help build new Hogan for you and little Dawn." "I don't know the first thing about building a Hogan," Rebecca protested. "We'll learn," Nijoni replied simply, "part of becoming Diné." As they walked back to Nijoni's dwelling, Rebecca cradling the still sleeping Dawn, she wondered if anything about her new life would unfold in ways she might anticipate. Every time she thought she had found her footing in this community, some new challenge or revelation emerged to unbalance her. Yet, as she settled onto her sleeping mat, with little Dawn nestled beside her, Rebecca felt an unexpected sense of peace. Beneath the day's tumult, she had survived the wagon attack when others had not. She had healed from wounds that should have been fatal. She had adapted to a culture vastly different from her own. Surely, she could learn to be a mother to this. orphaned child, to build a home for them both, to forge a life within the embrace of the Tachiini clan. With that determination settling in her heart, Rebecca drifted into sleep, one hand resting protectively on Dawn's cradleboard, unaware that the challenges to come would test her resolve in ways she could not possibly imagine. True to Nijoni's word, construction of Rebecca's hogan began the following morning. The entire village participated in the effort, with men cutting and trimming timbers, while women prepared the earth mixture that would form the walls. Children gathered stones for the foundation, and elders offered guidance on proper orientation and construction techniques. Rebecca worked alongside everyone else, her arms soon coated to the elbows in mud as she helped form the earthen walls. Little Dawn observed the activity from her cradleboard, secured in the shade of a juniper tree where several older children took turns entertaining her. "Hogan must face east," explained an elderly man named Deswood as he directed the placement of the doorframe. "To welcome morning sun, new beginnings." Rebecca nodded, absorbing this cultural knowledge as she had so much else in recent weeks. "Is there significance to the circular shape?" she asked, noting how the structure was gradually taking form as a rounded dwelling rather than the rectangular buildings she was accustomed to from white settlements. "Circle is harmony," Deswood replied, using a forked stick to measure the height of the wall section. "No corners for bad spirits to hide, everything connected like family, like tribe." He glanced at her appraisingly. "You ask good questions, want to understand, not just know." By midday, the framework was complete, and the mud plastering of the walls well underway. Rebecca paused in her work to check on Dawn, who had begun to fuss in the increasing heat. As she lifted the baby from her cradleboard, a shadow fell across them both. "She needs shade," Key said, appearing beside them with his characteristic silent movement, "and water." He offered a small clay cup filled with water that had been mixed with a mild herbal tea. Rebecca accepted it gratefully, using a clean cloth to drip small amounts of liquid into Dawn's eager mouth. "Thank you," she said, looking up at Key. "For this, and for..." She gestured toward the hogan rising under the community's efforts. "All of this." Key nodded once, his gaze moving from Dawn to the construction site. "Building home together strengthens bonds, old tradition." He hesitated, then added, "My brother helps there, good with wood." Rebecca followed his gaze to where a man she had seen around the village but never formally met was skillfully fitting joints in the roof structure. The family resemblance was clear, the same high cheekbones and straight nose, though Key's brother was shorter and broader across the shoulders. "I didn't know you had a brother," she said, realizing how little she actually knew about Key's family beyond Nijoni and Nasha. "Ashki," Key supplied, "lives on far side of village with his wives." "Wives?" Rebecca couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. "Plural." Something that might have been amusement flickered in Key's eyes. "Sisters, both lost husbands in raid many years ago. Ashki married elder sister first, then younger when her husband died. Cares for both and their children." He glanced at her expression and added, "Not common practice, but accepted when need arises." Rebecca nodded, filing this cultural information away. She had encountered numerous customs among the Navajo that would have scandalized white society, yet which made perfect sense within the context of community survival and interdependence. "Will Dawn have clan uncles and aunts beyond you and Nijoni?" she asked, curious about the kinship structures that would shape her adopted daughter's life. "Many," Key confirmed. "All Tachini are her people. But closest bonds will be with my brother's family, with elders who share our bloodline." He looked down at Dawn, who had fallen asleep in Rebecca's arms after her drink. "She will never be alone, even if..." He trailed off. "Even if what?" Key's expression grew more guarded. Even if you decide to leave someday, return to your people. The suggestion startled Rebecca. I have no intention of leaving, she said firmly. Especially not now, with Dawn. This is my home now. Intention changes, Key said with a shrug. White soldiers come looking for lost settlers. Traders bring news of silver strikes, new towns. Your brother-in-law might find you. His gaze met hers directly. Dawn stays with Clan if you go. Must understand this. Rebecca felt a chill despite the midday heat. I wouldn't abandon her. Not ever. Good, Key said simply. He gestured toward the hogan, where workers were taking a break for the midday meal. Come, eat. Building continues after rest. The work proceeded throughout the afternoon and into the evening. By sunset, the basic structure was complete. Walls plastered, roof sealed, a small smoke hole positioned at the center. The interior still needed furnishing, and the final mud coating would require several days to dry properly, but the essential dwelling was ready. As darkness fell, a small ceremony was held to bless the new home. Elder Hosteen led prayers while sweet-smelling herbs were burned to purify the space. Rebecca stood in the doorway, Dawn in her arms, as members of the Tachini clan filed past, each adding a small gift to the interior. A woven mat, cooking utensils, a water jug, blankets, a small store of provisions. Many hands make light work, Nizoni observed as she helped arrange these gifts into orderly positions around the hogan's perimeter. Same hands help when needed. Remember this. Rebecca nodded, understanding the deeper message beneath the practical statement. The village's assistance came with an expectation of reciprocity, of contribution to communal needs. It was a concept, both foreign to the individualistic ethos of white settlers and deeply familiar to her own instincts about community. That first night in her new dwelling, with Dawn sleeping peacefully in her cradle board and the unfamiliar sounds of the hogan settling around her, Rebecca felt a profound sense of transition. She was no longer Rebecca Mitchell, widow and schoolteacher, seeking a new beginning in a distant mining town. She was Rebecca of the Tachini, mother to little Dawn, member of a community bound by ties, both chosen and circumstantial. The days that followed established a new rhythm to her life. Mornings began with caring for Dawn, whose personality emerged more clearly as she grew more comfortable with her new mother. She was an observant baby with dark, serious eyes that tracked movement and a smile that appeared rarely but transformed her small face when it did. After morning chores, Rebecca would gather the village children for English lessons, which had become her primary contribution to community life. Dawn accompanied her, securely fastened in her cradle board where she could observe the activities. The children, initially hesitant around the white woman, had gradually warmed to her teaching style, which incorporated games and stories alongside more formal instruction. "Why we need English?" asked a young boy named Toe one morning, his face scrunched in concentration as he struggled to form the unfamiliar letters Rebecca had drawn in the dirt floor of the teaching hogan. "Dine words better. Dine words are beautiful." Rebecca agreed, correcting his grip on the charcoal stick he was using to practice writing. But knowing English helps when trading with white settlers, or speaking with soldiers, or reading the papers they make us sign. This practical explanation satisfied the boy, who returned to his careful copying of the alphabet. Rebecca had found that framing her lessons in terms of survival skills, rather than abstract knowledge, resonated more effectively with both the children and their parents. Afternoons were typically devoted to traditional women's work: weaving, pottery making, food preparation, hide tanning. Rebecca's skills in these areas were still developing, but she found unexpected satisfaction in mastering tasks that had no equivalent in her previous life. There was a meditative quality to grinding corn between stones, to the rhythm of the weaving loom, to the careful scraping and stretching of hides. Evenings brought the community together for shared meals and storytelling around cookfires. Rebecca listened attentively to these tales, recognizing them as cultural repositories that contained both practical knowledge and spiritual guidance. Dawn would often fall asleep against her chest during these gatherings, the baby's breathing, a gentle counterpoint to the rise and fall of the storyteller's voice. Key's role in their daily life remained somewhat peripheral. He was frequently absent from the village, hunting or scouting or engaging in trading expeditions with neighboring tribes. When present, he would often stop by Rebecca's hogan, bringing small gifts for Dawn: a rabbit skin softened for her comfort, a tiny moccasin carved from wood as a teething toy, a feather tied with colored thread that caught her attention with its movement. These visits were brief, practical, focused primarily on the baby's welfare, yet Rebecca found herself looking forward to them with an anticipation that surprised her. There was something compelling about Key's quiet strength, his economy of speech and movement, the depth of feeling that occasionally revealed itself in his interactions with Dawn. Nijoni, observing one such visit, made a cryptic comment as Key departed. "My brother walks careful path with you." "What do you mean?" Rebecca asked, settling Dawn for her afternoon nap. Nijoni gave her a look that suggested the answer should be obvious. "He respects your grief, your independence." She adjusted a blanket over the sleeping infant. "Not all men would." Rebecca considered this. "Thomas has been gone almost a year," she said softly. "The grief isn't as sharp now. But I'm not looking for another husband, if that's what you're suggesting." "Not suggesting," Nijoni replied, with a shrug. "Just observing. Key, also lost spouse, understands long shadows of such loss." She picked up a basket of mending, clearly considering the conversation finished, but paused at the hogan entrance. Dawn needs father as well as mother. Something to think about. Before Rebecca could formulate a response to this startling statement, Nijoni had departed, leaving her alone with the sleeping baby and a sudden awareness of possibilities she had deliberately avoided considering. The summer advanced, bringing scorching days and brief, violent thunderstorms that transformed dry washes into raging torrents within minutes. Rebecca learned to read the signs of approaching weather in the clouds, in the behavior of animals, in the subtle shift of winds. She learned which plants could be harvested for food or medicine, which were poisonous, which would attract game when placed in strategic locations. Dawn thrived under the collective care of the village. She began sitting up on her own, reaching for objects with growing coordination, babbling in a private language punctuated by occasional recognizable sounds. Rebecca spoke to her in both English and the Navajo words she herself was gradually mastering, believing that the child would benefit from fluency in both tongues. One evening, as Rebecca sat outside her hogan, enjoying the cooler air after a particularly hot day, Nasha appeared with news that sent a chill through her despite the lingering heat. "Riders coming," the girl reported, slightly breathless from running. "Blue coats, soldiers." Rebecca's heart contracted with sudden fear. "How many? How far?" 8, maybe 10. We'll reach village by morning." Nasha's young face was solemn. "Father says you should know. Prepare words." The implication was clear. If the soldiers were searching for survivors of the wagon train, Rebecca would need to explain her presence among the Navajo in a way that protected the village from accusations of kidnapping or worse. It was a scenario she had mentally rehearsed many times, yet the reality of its impending arrival filled her with apprehension. "Where is your father now?" she asked, rising to gather Dawn from where she had been playing on a blanket. with counsel, making plans. Nasha chewed her lip nervously. Some say you should hide when soldiers come. Others say better if you speak to them. Rebecca nodded, understanding the dilemma. Her presence could either diffuse suspicion or inflame it, depending on how the soldiers interpreted the situation. I won't hide, she decided aloud. I've done nothing wrong, and neither has the village. The truth is our best protection. Nasha seemed relieved by this declaration. I will tell father. He said same thing. She hesitated, then added, he also says Dawn should stay with Nijoni when soldiers come. Not good for them to see white. Woman with Navajo baby. This practical consideration hadn't occurred to Rebecca, and she felt a flash of shame at the oversight. Of course, the soldiers might react negatively to seeing her mothering a Navajo child. They might even attempt to rescue her based on assumptions about her circumstances, separating her from Dawn and the community she had come to call home. Tell your father I agree, she said, hugging Dawn closer. Dawn will stay with Nijoni. When the soldiers arrive, Nasha nodded and departed to deliver the message. Rebecca remained outside her hogan for some time, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky while her mind raced with preparations for the coming encounter. What would she say if questioned about why she had not sought to return to white settlements? How would she explain her adoption into the Tachini clan without making it sound like native superstition to military ears? And what if they insisted she leave with them, regardless of her wishes? These questions followed Rebecca into uneasy dreams that night. She woke before dawn, Dawn still sleeping peacefully beside her, and moved quietly to prepare for the day. She selected her clothing with deliberate care, a compromise between the Navajo garments she had grown accustomed to and the more conventional dress that might put the soldiers at ease. A simple buckskin skirt paired with a cotton blouse she had preserved from her former life, her hair braided neatly, rather than adorned with the beads and feathers she sometimes wore for village ceremonies. As dawn broke, Nijoni arrived to take the baby. Council decided, she informed Rebecca as she gathered Dawn's belongings. You meet soldiers with Key and Elder Hostine at village edge. Others continue normal activities. No hiding, no weapons visible. Rebecca nodded, understanding the strategy. Present an image of peaceful daily life while having respected representatives engage with the visitors. Will the soldiers know I'm here? Are they specifically looking for survivors? Scout watched them last night. They asked questions at trading. Post about wagon train attacked last season. Show paper with names. Nijoni secured Dawn in her cradleboard with practiced movements. Your name on paper. A chill ran through Rebecca, despite the already warming air. Someone was specifically searching for her. Perhaps Thomas's brother, who might have finally organized a proper search, or military authorities investigating the attack. Either way, the careful life she had constructed here was about to intersect with the world she had left behind. Give me a moment with her, Rebecca said, reaching for Dawn. Nijoni handed over the baby, her expression softening slightly. Rebecca held Dawn close, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair, feeling the solid warmth of her small body. I'll be back soon, she whispered, though the baby was too young to understand. Be good for Auntie Nijoni. She used the Navajo kinship term deliberately, a small affirmation of the family bonds they had formed. After Nijoni departed with Dawn, Rebecca took a deep breath and stepped outside. The village was unnaturally quiet, though people moved about, their morning tasks with deliberate normalcy. Children had been instructed to stay close to hogans rather than playing in open areas. Men sat in small groups, seemingly engaged in casual conversation while maintaining clear sightlines to the village approaches. Key waited for her near the central cooking area, speaking quietly with Elder Hostine. Both men wore their usual clothing, though Rebecca noted the absence of weapons that typically accompanied Key. As she approached, Key looked up, his dark eyes assessing her appearance with a quick glance. "Good choice," he said, nodding at her. "Blended attire. Shows respect for both worlds." Elder Hosteen, his face impassive beneath his white hair, added, "Speak truth, but carefully. No need to tell all details unless asked directly." Rebecca nodded, grateful for the guidance. "I understand." A young boy came running from the direction of the Eastern Trail, skidding to a stop before them. "They come," he reported. 8 riders, slow pace. Key exchanged a glance with Hosteen, then turned to Rebecca. "Ready?" She squared her shoulders, drawing on an inner strength that had been forged through months of adaptation and challenge. "Yes." The three walked together toward the eastern edge of the village, where the main trail widened to accommodate visitors. They positioned themselves in the shade of a large juniper tree, presenting a calm, dignified reception rather than a defensive stance. Within minutes, the patrol appeared around a bend in the trail. 8 riders, as reported, their blue uniforms distinct against the dusty landscape. They rode in formation, led by an officer whose bearing suggested experience despite his relatively young age. Behind him, somewhat out of place among the uniformed men, rode a civilian whose familiar profile made Rebecca's heart skip. William Mitchell, Thomas's older brother. She had met him only twice before her journey west. Once at her wedding to Thomas, and again at Thomas's funeral. He had written to her afterward, offering a place for her in Silver Creek, where he had established a successful mine and, according to his letters, helped found a small but growing community that needed a schoolteacher. The officer raised his hand, bringing the patrol to a halt some 20 paces from where Rebecca stood with Key and Hosteen. His gaze swept across the three of them, lingering on Rebecca with undisguised surprise. "I am Lieutenant James Wilson, United States Cavalry," he announced, his voice carrying clearly across the distance. "We're conducting an investigation into the massacre of a wagon train bound for Silver Creek approximately 9 months ago." William Mitchell urged his horse forward slightly, his eyes fixed on Rebecca with incredulous recognition. Rebecca Mitchell, my God, it is you." He started to dismount, but the lieutenant motioned for him to remain on his horse. "Mrs. Mitchell," the officer asked, his tone sharpening with interest, "you were part of the wagon train attacked last autumn?" Rebecca stepped forward slightly, keeping her voice steady. "I was, Lieutenant. I'm Rebecca Mitchell, formerly of St. Louis. I was traveling to Silver Creek after my husband's death when our wagon train was attacked by renegade raiders." The lieutenant's hand moved instinctively toward his sidearm, his gaze shifting to Key and Hosteen with sudden suspicion. "And you're being held here against your will?" "No," Rebecca said firmly. "I was wounded in the attack and left for dead." "Key Yazzie," she gestured toward the Navajo hunter, "found me in the desert and brought me here. The Navajo healed me and gave me shelter when I had nowhere else to go. I remain here by choice." William Mitchell dismounted despite the lieutenant's previous gesture, approaching with disbelieving eyes. "We thought you were dead. When word reached Silver Creek about the attack, I organized searches, but we found only—" He trailed off, the horror of what they had discovered evident in his expression. "How did you survive when no one else did?" "I had left the main camp to gather herbs," Rebecca explained. "When I heard the shooting, I ran back, but it was already too late. I was shot twice with arrows as I fled. The raiders must have assumed I would die from my wounds. Lieutenant Wilson had dismounted as well, though he maintained a cautious distance." "And you've been living among the Navajo all this time? Why didn't you attempt to reach a white settlement once you recovered?" Rebecca met his gaze directly. "The nearest settlement was many days' journey through dangerous territory. I was severely wounded, without supplies or protection. The Navajo offered me shelter, healing, and eventually a place in their community. I chose to stay." "Chose to stay," William repeated incredulously. "With savages?" "Rebecca, this isn't right. Thomas wouldn't want—" "Thomas is dead," she interrupted, her voice sharper than she had intended. She softened her tone with effort. "And these people are not savages, William. They saved my life when they could have left me to die, just as the raiders did to our entire wagon train." Key stepped forward slightly, his presence a silent support beside her. "The men who attacked Wagon Train were renegades," he said, his English clear though accented. "Same who killed our people, not Navajo raiders." Lieutenant Wilson studied Key with undisguised skepticism. "You expect us to believe that you just happened to find Mrs. Mitchell dying in the desert and brought her back out of the goodness of your heart?" Elder Hosteen spoke for the first time, his dignity commanding attention despite his age. "Dine, way teaches respect for life. Woman alone injured would die without help. To leave her would bring hoksho, disharmony, evil. We are not your enemies, Lieutenant." The officer seemed momentarily taken aback by the elder's calm authority. He turned back to Rebecca. "Mrs. Mitchell, regardless of how you came to be here, surely you understand that your proper place is among your own people. We can escort you to Fort Sullivan, where arrangements can be made for your transportation to Silver Creek or any other settlement you prefer." Rebecca felt a flash of indignation at his presumption. "My proper place is where I choose it to be, Lieutenant. I have built a life here. I teach the children English, which helps them navigate interactions with white authorities and traders. I've been adopted into the Tachini clan according to their customs. I have responsibilities that I cannot simply abandon." William moved closer, his expression a mixture of confusion and concern. "Rebecca, listen to yourself. You're talking about native superstitions as if they're binding contracts. Whatever debt of gratitude you feel can be repaid in other ways. We can send supplies, medicines—" "It's not about debt," Rebecca interrupted. "It's about belonging, about finding a community that values contribution over social standing, that measures worth by actions rather than appearances." She softened her tone, seeing the genuine worry in her brother-in-law's eyes. "I appreciate that you came looking for me, William, truly. But my decision to remain here is made with clear understanding of all it entails." Lieutenant Wilson exchanged glances with his men, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Mrs. Mitchell, I cannot in good conscience leave an American woman in a native settlement, regardless of the circumstances or your current attachments to their ways." Rebecca's spine stiffened. "On what authority would you remove me against—" "My will, Lieutenant. I am a free citizen, not a prisoner or a ward of the state." The officer flushed slightly at the direct challenge. "It's a matter of your welfare and safety, ma'am." "My welfare and safety have been well provided for these past months," she countered. "More effectively than the army managed when our wagon train was attacked, despite warnings about renegade activity in the region." Key tensed beside her at this bold statement, but maintained his composed expression. The lieutenant's flush deepened, his jaw tightening at the implied criticism. William intervened, perhaps sensing the rising tension. "Rebecca, no one is suggesting taking you by force, but surely you can understand our concern. At least come to Silver Creek for a visit. See what we've built there, the opportunity for a proper life among your own kind." Rebecca hesitated, recognizing the genuine plea beneath his words. William had been kind to her after Thomas's death, offering support when she had few options remaining. She owed him at least the courtesy of honest consideration. "I cannot leave immediately," she said finally. "I have responsibilities here that must be properly transferred if I'm to be absent for any period." She did not mention Dawn, still, uncertain how William or the lieutenant would react to her adoption of a Navajo child. "If you return in 2 weeks' time, I would be willing to accompany you to Silver Creek for a short visit. But I will return here afterward." Lieutenant Wilson looked as though he might object to this compromise, but William spoke quickly. 2 weeks. That's reasonable. We can resupply at Fort Sullivan and return. He extended his hand toward Rebecca. It's good to see you alive, Rebecca. Thomas would be grateful that you survived. She took his hand briefly, a connection to her former life that felt both familiar and strangely distant. Thank you for not giving up the search, William. As arrangements were made for the patrol's departure, Rebecca was aware of Key's silent presence beside her, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. Only when the soldiers had mounted and begun to move away did he speak, his voice low enough that only she could hear. You will go to this Silver Creek? For a visit only, she confirmed, watching the patrol disappear around a bend in the trail. I need to close that chapter properly, to see for myself what might have been, so I can fully embrace what is. Key nodded once, his gaze following the departing riders. 2 weeks, not much time to prepare Dawn for your absence. I know. Will you help Nijoni care for her while I'm gone? Of course. He turned to face her fully, his dark eyes searching hers. You will return? The question held more weight than its simple words suggested. Rebecca met his gaze steadily, recognizing the moment for what it was, a crossroads, a choice between worlds that might never again intersect if she chose wrongly. I will return, she said, the promise emerging with quiet certainty. This is my home now. You are my people. Something in Key's expression shifted, a subtle softening that most would have missed. Good, he said simply, and together they walked back toward the village, where Dawn waited, unaware of the momentous decisions being made that would shape her future. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.